All right, let's look at this concept of the flow of money and where you fit in an organization. How does the flow of money in an organization refer to you? How should you see it? And so I'm going to give you an example. Several years ago, so this person no longer works for EAC. Um, they're gone a long time ago, and I had just started working there full time. So I taught part time for quite a long time. And they came to my class and they were working on a computer and they were really kind of ticked off. And I'm thinking, you know what, if you don't like working on computers, why did you go into technology, right? Just don't do that. Of course, I didn't say that. And they started complaining and griping about some things. And I'm sure they felt like I would understand having been in the business, but my approach was a lot different than theirs. I never felt the way they did. And that's partly because I understand the flow of money. So they said, yeah, and if it wasn't for all these computers and everything that we do in our department, you wouldn't have what you have. You wouldn't be able to do what you do. And so, we're the most important thing that there is. And I said, um, not really. I'm an educator, I'm a teacher. So I'm like, it's time to teach. So I said, not really. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I mean, if we didn't have all these computers in here, what would you be able to do, right? You teach technology. I said, all I need to do is to teach technology is I need a book and I need a pencil and I need my students to have the same thing. And as long as they have those things, I can teach them something. That's reality, right? All this stuff is online and that's fantastic. Everything we do with labs and virtual labs and all that just is so much more. But when it comes down to it, I could have a textbook, say, read that, and now I'm going to test you over it, or I want you to write something over it, and you'll get the information you need. I told them, they were like, yeah, that's, I guess. And I said, well, where does the EAC get its money from? The student. Yeah, and the student, maybe a lot of that comes from the feds, but it comes from the student. So the student is our customer. The student is who we have to keep happy. So in other words, your job is to keep the student happy. If that computer's not working, the student's not happy. Your job is not to keep me happy, right? It's to keep the student happy. And that's part of why they were upset. They were like, I got to keep you happy. Why do I have to keep you happy? It's like, you need to look at where the flow of money is. And the flow of money comes from that student. And so the student needs to be happy. Every decision we make at Eastern Arizona College should come or extend from, we need to make the student happy. Now, that's not always going to happen, right? Every student wants an A, but every student wants an excellent education. Sometimes those two things don't go together, right? I want you to have an excellent education, so I'm going to demand these things of you. You don't do some of those things, then you end up with a C, right? So flow of money there, you have to balance all these little things that you're looking at. But let's take a look at something that's easier. You are a tech person and you're working for Apple computers, and you as a tech person keep their email system running. That's always a good example. That's hugely important, right? The email system goes down in a company like that. What? That's going to be a bad day. That's millions of dollars in productivity lost. So that's your job, is to keep that email system running. So you can sit there and say, I'm so important because I got to keep this email system, and this company wouldn't exist without that email system. It's vital to everything we do. Well, that's one way to look at it. But do you make the product? Do you ship the product? Do you collect money for that? No. And because of that, you are not that close to the money flow, right? And that's really what you have to do. Anywhere you go to work, you need to understand that. You need to take a look and say, okay, I'm working for this. Let's say you go to work for one of those big car places. Some of those car places in Phoenix, they own like 3 or 4 all over the valley, and they all intercommunicate and they're networked with each other and they're going into the same systems. So it's more than what you think when you walk in the door, right? I always look at that stuff. So you're the guy that keeps all that running. So how important are you? Well, you can look and say, well, if those systems go down, right? They're not selling any cars. So I'm really important. I'm really close to the money. Well, actually not, right? Because what they could do is start using paper again and take all that information down from the customers, come to all sorts of agreements, have them legally sign on a piece of paper that they're going to buy that car and worry about it once the system comes up. Now, that's a terrible inconvenience for them. They don't want that to happen. Somebody's probably going to lose their job if it does happen. But at the same time, you're not the one selling the car. That's the point. The one selling the car is always going to make more money than you because they're really close to the money. They're really linked to the money. And that's what you have to look at. I remember being young in my job and looking at how accounting was treated in almost every single business I worked at. They're just treated like, oh, we got to make sure, and we got to make sure, and we got to make sure. And then, of course, it dawned on me, why is it that way? Well, because there's no checks without accounting, right? You're not getting paid without the accounting department. So you as an IT person, if you were over the whole company, you're going to make sure that that accounting department is running like clockwork. Otherwise, if something does go wrong, your pay may be delayed and you're not going to like that, right? They're really close to that money. And so you need to understand that flow of money, where it comes from the customer, what it's being used for in the organization. And that's why accounting is always treated so well, is because they have to deal with that. They have to deal with taxes, they have to pay you, they have to pay them, they have to charge that. Um, and you may not be in that situation. Now, on the opposite end of that, again, technology, as we become more and more reliant on it, you're really getting closer to the flow of the money. And that is why pay is going up in technology. Because as we move further and further away from the old technologies, we get to the point where we're like, we cannot live without this. We have to have this. And again, if I use the EAC as an example, as an instructor, all those computers in the lab could stop working and we could get around it. Think if the area flooded, right? We could still make sure you learned what you needed to learn and get the grades you need to get and get that transcript and get that job, right? We can still do that. But how about the pay? That's going to be different. So if you're working in the tech department at EAC, right, accounting is still going to be something you make sure works really well. And then the computers the students use are going to be the next thing you should be making sure. All the systems that the students use, because that's your customer. And so as we as technologists get more and more dependent on and become more important to any organization that we're working in, the more you can expect that money to raise. And that's why people that manage tech departments in larger organizations get paid a lot of money. They get paid 200, 300, 400. I mean, the guy at Apple, I'm sure, is making seven figures because they got to make sure all of that's running. Otherwise, our dependence on it's so great, the company disappears without it. So, and then take a look at where you fit in the organization. And the other thing that can help with these two in understanding the importance of them is that you want to move closer to the flow of money. So if you're looking at a position and you're like, I don't care whether I do this or whether I do that, which one is the company more dependent on? If this system went down and you're working with this system, what effect does that have? The one that they can't live without is the one you want to be on because chances are you're going to get paid more money on that. Anyway, hopefully we'll get some comments on in class, people talking about these things, but that's it for this particular session.